My name is Isabel Lima. I'm 40 years old, and today I'm here to share the story that changed my life forever. For over 2 decades, I lived inside the walls of a convent in Italy, convinced that my sacrifice was God's will. But what I witnessed and experienced there made me question everything I once believed. I grew up in a family deeply rooted in tradition, in a village where religion wasn't just a belief, but the very foundation of our existence. My father, a man of rigid stance and unwavering principles, saw faith as the cornerstone of order and discipline in our home. From childhood, I was raised under the strict dogmas of Catholicism, where devotion wasn't a personal choice, but an unquestionable obligation. Every action, every thought had to fully comply with the teachings we were given, and any slip was treated as a serious offense. But as the years passed, my restless mind began to challenge what I had accepted without hesitation. I asked questions, sought answers, but often was met with uncomfortable silences or warning looks, telling me not to press further. When I turned 19, my life took an unexpected turn. My father, noticing my growing desire for independence, saw my attitude as an unacceptable defiance. To him, a woman wanting to forge her own path was a direct threat to the values he held dear. Convinced that the outside world was a source of corruption and ruin, he made a drastic decision. Without giving me any chance to choose, he sent me to the convent of Santa Maria da Redenção. In his eyes, that place was the only one capable of preserving my purity and guiding me toward a purpose worthy in God's sight. Crossing the convent gates, I felt I was leaving not only my home behind, but also an essential part of who I was. The environment felt cut off from the rest of the world by imposing stone walls that seemed to absorb all life from the outside. Light barely filtered through narrow windows, casting long shadows down the cold, silent corridors. The air carried a weight, not of peace, but of submission. As soon as I arrived, I was told to get rid of anything that could remind me of my past life. Clothes, jewelry, memories. They stripped us of everything, as if erasing our past was a necessary step for the purification of the soul. The rules inside the convent were absolute, and obedience was demanded without question. Speaking without permission was strictly forbidden. Silence wasn't just a sign of respect. It was a tool for complete spiritual submission. The daily routine was exhausting and unchanging. Prayers at dawn, long hours of manual labor, religious studies in the afternoon, and penance before rest. Submission wasn't just expected, it was enforced as the foundation of life within those walls. The one who ruled the convent with unquestioned authority was the Mother Superior, Sister Josephine. Her presence inspired an almost reverential fear. Her piercing gaze and rigid posture made it clear there was no room for doubt or disobedience. From the very first moment, she made it clear that her word was law, and defying her orders was out of the question. At first I tried to adjust, believing that resignation would bring me closer to God, but soon an unrest began to grow inside me. Something about the place made me uneasy, a feeling of oppression I couldn't explain. As the days passed, I realized I wasn't the only one feeling this way. Many of the sisters lived in a constant state of fear. They avoided eye contact, spoke with trembling voices, and always walked with their heads down, as if carrying some invisible weight. The long silences, unexplained absences, the quiet whispers echoing down the hallways at night. All of it made me see that something was wrong in that place. One time, while praying in the chapel, I spotted a young nun kneeling in a corner. Her chest rose and fell unevenly. Her hands were shaking. I stepped closer, intending to ask if she was okay, but as soon as she noticed me, she suddenly stood up and hurried away without even looking back. In that moment, I understood that a dark secret hung over the convent. From then on, I became more aware of what was happening around me. Discreet glances, interrupted conversations, hurried footsteps at unusual hours. One day, while helping to organize the library alongside a novice named Cara, something happened that sent chills down my spine. Unlike the others, Cara always seemed restless, as if she lived under constant watch. In a rare moment of calm, she leaned in, and in a voice barely above a whisper said words that would stay with me forever. "Isabella, this place isn't what it seems." My instinct was to demand an explanation, but before I could say anything, the abbess appeared in the doorway. In that instant, Cara grew silent and lowered her head as if she had said nothing at all. But her words echoed inside me. What did she mean? What was really going on? If this convent was supposed to be a sanctuary of faith and redemption, why did so many sisters live in fear? That night, as I tried to fall asleep, I heard a whisper coming from the next cell. Moving closer and pressing my ear to the wall was instinctive. It was Cara's voice, trembling. "Lord, please help me get out of here." My heart raced. I wanted to call back to let her know I was there, but something inside me held back my words. In the days that followed, the tension inside me only grew. Part of me wanted to believe the convent was a sacred place, but the signs that something unsettling was happening became harder to ignore. Then something unexpected happened. During one morning prayer, I realized Cara wasn't in her usual spot. I searched the sisters' faces but couldn't find her. At the end of the ceremony, I asked one of the nuns where she was. Her reaction alarmed me. Fear flickered in her eyes before she looked away, refusing to answer. I pressed another sister for information, but before she could respond, the abbess appeared and coldly declared, "Tiara has been transferred, no more questions." But I had so many. Her absence was impossible to overlook, and what troubled me most was the complete silence surrounding it. It was as if she had never existed. Any attempt to find answers was met with horrified stares and silence. That's when the abbess noticed my persistent questioning, and one night summoned me to her office. The room was cold and austere, decorated with sacred images and a large crucifix hanging on the wall. Without looking up from the papers on her desk, she said in a chilling tone, "Sister Isabella, I've noticed your restlessness. Remember, obedience is the foundation of our life devoted to God." I was speechless. Her tone left no room for argument. "Here we follow the Lord's will," she continued. "We must not be distracted by matters that do not concern us. Chiara was transferred for reasons that need not be explained. Focus on your faith." I left that room with a heavy heart. Something was wrong, I knew it. But how could I uncover the truth without drawing attention? From that moment on, I pretended to be submissive, but secretly, I began searching for answers. Then one dark night, I found proof that my fears were real. My hands trembled as I closed the diary. There in the aged pages was confirmation of my worst fears. What was happening in that convent wasn't new. It had been lurking for years, perhaps decades, hidden beneath a veil of silence and terror. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress my panic. I looked around, ensuring no one had followed me, and hid the notebook under my clothes before leaving the attic with quick but discreet steps. When I returned to my cell, I waited for nightfall to reread every word. With renewed attention to each line, I felt my chest tighten, as if crushed by an invisible weight. How could a sacred place conceal something so wicked? Why was no one doing anything to stop it? I remembered my childhood, my mother's gentle voice telling me about God's love. I recalled my father's stern words as he sent me here, believing I would find my purpose. But what lived within these walls was not love. It was oppression, punishment, fear. I didn't close my eyes that night. I stayed awake until dawn, holding the diary against my chest, as if it were the last truth I could cling to. The next morning, I sat at the dining table with the other sisters. But now the silence no longer felt like a gesture of devotion. It was an unbearable weight, a cruel reminder of everything forbidden to say. I looked around at the faces with fresh eyes. How many of them knew the truth? How many had suffered under this system? Some had red eyes, as if they had been crying in secret. Others carried tense shoulders, their movements restrained and their words carefully measured. Fear was everywhere, and now I could see it clearly. Later, while organizing the pantry, I found myself next to Rose, a quiet novice who rarely spoke. Her eyes held the same shadow of fear I was starting to recognize in the others. I seized the moment of privacy, and in a barely audible whisper asked, "Do you know what happened to Claire?" Her reaction was immediate. Her face hardened and she quickly shook her head. "Don't ask questions, Isabel," she murmured, her voice heavy with anguish. "Don't make the same mistake she did." A chill ran down my spine. The same mistake, I repeated, swallowing hard. Rose glanced around anxiously, as if afraid someone might be listening. Then she moved closer and whispered so softly I could barely hear her. Claire wanted to leave, and those who try to escape disappear. My breath caught in my throat. "Where do they take them?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. Rose turned away and slowly shook her head. "I don't know, but no one has ever come back." Before I could say anything else, one of the sisters entered the pantry. Rose immediately pulled away, returning to her work as if nothing had happened. But I stood there, frozen by fear. That night I couldn't sleep. Lying in the dark, my mind raced with unanswered questions. Could they punish me just for asking? The days that followed completely changed my view of the convent. Before, I thought its strictness was a form of devotion, but now it was clear. It was a system built on fear. Harsh punishments were handed out for trivial offences. Endless hours kneeling on grains of rice, prolonged fasting, until weakness set in isolation in dark cells. It wasn't long before I was punished myself. One afternoon, for failing to finish my cleaning on time, I was forced to kneel and pray for 6 hours straight without moving. The burning in my legs turned into unbearable pain. My empty stomach twisted in spasms. No one intervened. No one dared to meet my eyes. It was there, in that position of suffering and humiliation, that a question began to echo in my mind. Was this what God wanted? If God is love, why was I taught to fear him instead of trust him? That thought took root inside me, and not long after, the confirmation that something terrible was happening came one night I will never forget. I woke up startled by a noise in the hallway, hurried footsteps, tense whispers, then a muffled sound like something heavy being dragged. My heart raced. I got up slowly and approached the door, peering through the small gap into the darkness of the hallway. I saw 2 figures moving stealthily. They were nuns, dragging something wrapped in a cloak. My body turned to stone. I couldn't see exactly what they were carrying, but an overwhelming sense of dread washed over me. My instinct screamed for me to act, but my legs wouldn't obey. Moments later, the footsteps faded into the silence of the night. The convent returned to its suffocating quietness. I went back to my bed and covered myself, but there was no way I could sleep anymore. If I stayed there in silence, ignoring what was happening, I could be the next to disappear. The hours dragged on until dawn, while a certainty took hold of me. I needed to escape. Then, when I least expected it, the opportunity arose. The door to my cell opened. My heart raced. It wasn't a nun. It wasn't the Mother Superior. It was Rose. Her eyes were wide, her hands trembling, but her expression was one of pure determination. "Isabel, we need to get out of here." I held my breath. "How?" "We don't have time," she interrupted. "I know a way." I felt her resolve without hesitation. We silently crept through the hallways, surrounded by darkness, lit only by scattered candles on the altars. Every shadow felt like an imminent threat, and every sound made me hold my breath. If we were caught, it would be the end for us. Rose led me to a small side door, hidden at the end of a forgotten corridor. "The key is with the Mother Superior," I whispered, panic tightening my throat. She pulled something from her habit, a set of keys. I took it when I collected the clothes from the laundry. I swallowed hard. Each second felt endless. Rose tried the first key. Nothing. The second, not yet. My chest burned with anxiety. On the third try, we heard the metallic click. The door creaked open. We exchanged a glance and ran. The cold night wind sliced across my face like a blade. The convent walls towered above, but Rose led me to a tree with branches hanging over the "We need to climb." My hands were sweaty, my body weak, but fear was stronger. I gripped the rough bark and we scrambled up. At the top of the wall, we paused for a brief moment. There it was. The outside world wasn't a grand scene, just the silent streets of a sleepy village. But to me, it was freedom. We jumped. The impact shook us, but we didn't stop. I held on to Rose's hand. We ran without looking back. We ran as if our lives depended on it, because they did. I don't know how long we kept going. Minutes, hours, an eternity. The cold ground punished our bare feet. The icy air bit at our skin, but we couldn't stop. When we finally slowed, we were already beyond the village limits. The sky was beginning to lighten on the horizon, painting the landscape with soft orange hues and rose. Rose fell to her knees out of breath. I collapsed beside her, feeling every muscle ablaze from the effort. We had made it. We had escaped. But now what? The cold morning wind wrapped around us, and for the first time I felt the emptiness surrounding me. I was free, but I no longer had a home. Tears burned in my eyes. What do we do now? Rose whispered, her voice weak. I looked toward the horizon at the unknown world ahead of us. The sun was timidly rising, bringing a silent promise of a new beginning. I know a place, I murmured, struggling to keep the uncertainty from my voice. I didn't know if it still existed, or if the people who once welcomed us were still there. But it was our only hope. I wiped away my tears and took Rose's hand firmly. God will guide us. We kept walking. Every person passing by gave us wary looks. We were just two skinny women in dirty, torn clothes, aimless, uncertain, with no clear future. But we didn't stop. The memory of the house came like a breath from the past. I was a child when my mother took me there. It was a simple but welcoming home where a Christian family helped those in need. If they were still there, maybe they would shelter us. When I saw it, I knew it was the same house. The white walls were more worn down, and the once thriving garden was now overrun with dry weeds. Time had left its mark, but something about that house still felt safe. Rose hesitated as I stood in front of the wooden door. My heart was racing. I swallowed hard and knocked. We waited in silence. Footsteps came from the other side. The door creaked open. A middle-aged woman looked at us, surprised. Her face was kind, framed by hair pulled back into a messy bun. "Yes?" she asked gently. My throat was dry. "My name is Isabel," I managed to say. "Many years ago my mother brought me here. You used to help people in trouble." Her expression shifted. A frown appeared between her eyebrows as she searched her memory. Then she whispered almost in disbelief, "Isabel, Teresa's daughter." My heart skipped a beat. "Yes," I replied, my voice trembling. Her eyes glimmered with emotion. "My God," she exclaimed before pulling me into a warm hug. "Here you will be safe." And for the first time I believed it. The following days were all about adjusting. My body was still weak and my mind haunted by the horrors of the convent. Sometimes I would wake in the middle of the night, heart pounding, expecting to hear the stern footsteps of the Mother Superior or the frightened whispers of the nuns in the dark hallways. But when I opened my eyes, all I saw was the soft glow of the lamp beside the bed. The fear didn't simply vanish. Rose was battling her own ghosts too. We spent hours sitting quietly in the courtyard, the small garden or the kitchen. We didn't need words. We knew we were rebuilding ourselves side by side. When my father finally found us, he watched me patiently. He never pressured me to talk about what I had been through, but one afternoon during coffee he broke the silence. "Daughter, did you feel God's presence in that place?" His question caught me off guard. I paused for a moment before answering, "Yes, but not the way I was taught to believe." He tilted his head, waiting. "When I was locked in that cell, I thought all was lost. I thought God had abandoned me. But just as I was about to give up, I felt something gentle, repeated again and again. It wasn't a voice or a visible miracle. It was peace. It was as if, suddenly, I knew I wasn't alone." Her eyes sparkled. "God has never left you, Isabel. But sometimes people twist faith to control others. True faith isn't about fear, it's about love." Her words were etched into my heart. Day by day, Rose and I began to rebuild our lives. We were given clean clothes, warm meals, and little by little we started to feel like we belonged somewhere again. I helped my dad in the carpentry shop, and each piece of wood I shaped seemed to restore a part of me. I would walk past the kitchen of the house that welcomed us. Occasionally I'd smile at it, embracing a feeling that once seemed impossible. But the biggest change came when my dad took us to church. It wasn't a dark place like the convent. It was a small wooden building bathed in sunlight streaming through large stained glass windows. As soon as I stepped inside, I felt a tightness in my chest, but it wasn't fear. It was emotion. Inside, people sang joyfully and prayed sincerely. There was no pressure, just gratitude. The pastor greeted us with a warm smile. He didn't ask for anything. He simply invited us to sit and listen. God never turns away from us, he said. It's us who sometimes walk away from him, but his love is eternal. His words hit me like lightning. It felt as if he was speaking directly to me. Tears streamed down my face, but this time they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of healing. My dad held my hand gently. Rose cried silently beside me. And then I understood. Faith wasn't a prison. Faith was freedom. Over time, our story began to spread. People started seeking us out. Some wanted to understand, others needed to share their pain. One night after a gathering at church, a young woman approached. Her eyes were misty, her hands trembling. I too whispered, "I've lived that too." The world stopped for a moment. I escaped years ago, but I never had the courage to speak until I heard you all. Rose and I exchanged glances. We were not alone, and then we understood that our mission was just beginning. God didn't save us just to help us escape the past. He saved us to help other women find the light. The water was cold, but none of that mattered the moment it submerged me. It was as if everything from the past began to dissolve. Fear, pain, guilt. Everything the convent tried to erase from me. God was restoring me. And as I emerged, the sound of applause and joyful voices filled the air. But nothing compared to what I felt inside. Freedom, peace, a new beginning. Soon after, it was Rose's turn. When she came out of the water, she wrapped me in a tight embrace. We cried together, but this time our tears were not of suffering. They were tears of joy, because after being trapped in darkness for so long, we had finally been redeemed. That night after the celebration, we sat on my father's porch, gazing at the starry sky. Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence full of gratitude and understanding. Then, after a long while, Rose whispered, "Do you think all of this happened for a reason?" I lifted my eyes to the sky and took a deep breath, feeling the night breeze brush against my skin. "Yes." She smiled softly, as if she expected that answer. I did too. We stayed there, taking in the vastness of the universe above us. Then Rose took my hand. "Thank you for not giving up." I smiled at her, feeling a warmth in my heart. "Thank you for standing by me." We closed our eyes and prayed, not for the past, not for what we had lost, but for everything God still had in store for us. Our journey was just beginning. God rescued us, he healed our wounds, and now he was calling us to live in his love. There was no more fear, no more pain. There was only grace, only freedom. And in that freedom, we found our true redemption.